Welcome everyone to Rewinding Founders. Today I'm with Maddie, one of the co-founders of Coffee Clozers. And Maddie, so nice to have you.
It's great to be here, Addie. So yeah, I'm really excited.
Cool. Okay. So before anything else, uh, how did you get into entrepreneurship?
That's a good question. I basically, I could say I started in entrepreneurship as a little kid. I was privileged enough to have my dad always encouraging me to do a lemonade stand or something like that, like washing people's cars. And he always told me, from the time I remember as like a 5, 6 year old, he told me, you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to be an entrepreneur. I was really lucky in that way. But as far as startups, I didn't get into startups despite growing up in Silicon Valley. I didn't get into startups until I think it was my junior year of university. And I had a friend that was joining a hackathon or doing a hackathon, and I had never done one before. She asked me if I wanted to come. Uh, we were both designers, user experience designers, and most people who did hackathons were in the computer science or business college. So we, joined and I kind of got the startup bug and I never looked back. It was just exciting and fun. And yep, that's how I got into it.
Amazing. What was the thing that you were working on back then? Like on in the hackathon itself?
In yeah, in the hackathon, we didn't place in the hackathon. I think it was because the problem we were solving was so difficult. So we were called Health Block, and essentially we used the blockchain to store. Okay, we we wanted to use the blockchain to store patient medical data and anonymize it so that you could use your IoT wearable device and almost sell your data on like a marketplace for healthcare data. So instead of, Apple using your heart rate monitor, heart rate variability, all of that data that they get from you that they anonymize, they're selling it en masse to um, research companies, things like that. We wanted to kind of allow the user to opt in to selling their data. And we did a lot of cool things. Like one of the engineers on that team was a computer vision engineer, and she created a program that could use eye tracking with the front-facing camera of an iPhone to detect autism in toddlers like early on. So it was really exciting. We had absolutely no, I mean, even now I'm not good at articulating the idea. I think it was really hard just, and so we lost that competition. We entered another competition, which I think we got third place in, and we were all working on our own things. Some people were in their second year of college, some of us were graduating, and we got third place in that second competition and kind of just split the money and it dissipated. So it never went on to be anything, but it was fun while it lasted.
Cool. And then fast forward, how did you get to the idea that you're working on now? What are you working on now?
Yeah, so to give you the kind of, I guess maybe this is going to be a long-winded answer, but after that all went down, graduated college, and I was, it was kind of like a come down from that startup high. So I was trying to apply to jobs. I had been working in a different startup at the time that was also in an incubator, and they wanted to hire me full time. They didn't have the money. They said, "Can you wait till the end of the summer?" So I just started applying to jobs, but I knew my heart really wasn't in it. And I had studied in Italy and also did my minor in Italian, and I really wanted to solidify my language skills. So I decided, much to my parents' dismay, that I was going to go be an au pair in Italy for a few months instead of entering the corporate world, which is what I did. And while I was there, I actually met a founder who was working on his company alone, and he needed a designer. And we kind of just met by chance. And he asked me, could you help me? Could you give me some advice on my design? And as soon as I saw the design, I knew he needed help. Eventually, we worked together for a couple months as like a trial period. Eventually, he asked me to be his co-founder. This was at the end of 2019. I had to go back home because my visa expired, and I was gearing up to go back to Italy in March of 2020, but for very obvious reasons, I wasn't able to do that. So we worked because of a certain, global event.
Small.
So we worked kind of remote for about 9, 10 months before I was finally able to go back to Europe, and we tried to build up the startup unsuccessfully, and that was the first, big failure. Um, one failure closer to success, right? We ran out of money. My visa expired. It was October of 2020, and we went on to work on a few other startups, and eventually, with my tail between my legs, I got a corporate job and did that for a couple of years. But my co-founder continued working on startup ideas, and he finally got this idea that he started working on that started to have some traction. He had brought on another designer co-founder, and they quit on him. So I could tell that he needed help, but I was still a little bit, nervous, especially after failure. And we could talk more about just failure as a concept later, but I was really hesitant to join again just because I had such a bruised ego, failure after failure after failure. It was like we had worked on like 3 or 4 different ideas together, and I was broke. All my friends were in these, already getting promoted in their careers, living in apartments in big cities and having the times of their lives. And I was, back home with my parents, no money. So eventually, like, I just stayed in that job for a couple of years, and he asked me if I could help out with a little bit of design. I was helping on the side. And then once they got into Founder University and then launch, I said, okay, like this is a real thing. I always knew, I would go back to this, and I quit my job. I had saved up enough money to have a little bit of a safety net, quit my job, and went full time on our current startup, which is called Coffee Closers.
Wow, I feel like that's the most relatable startup story ever. Like,
Yeah.
you do something, at some point, it's kind of like, okay, everyone is getting ahead with life, and I'm just like here, unsuccessful and broke, and I have to do something. And it's so
Yeah.
funny. I love how you just described that whole process of ups and downs, sort of.
Oh
Like
yeah,
it's
it's never, even like once you have the successful startup, from what I can, see from other founders, is that it's still ups and downs. Like there's just newer, bigger problems.
yeah, it doesn't run out.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So when you were working with your co-founder back then, and now that you're working with him, do you see any difference in the way you guys interact, the way you communicate? Do you think that has affected anything?
Yeah, I think that at the beginning it was really difficult because I'm a very creative kind of big picture, like open-minded, flowy person. And he was a lot more like his background was in law. He was more of like an engineer mindset. So I think we really struggled to communicate. It was always, like I can't remember where I first heard this, but like, you're like rocks rubbing up against each other until you can become smooth. And we had to learn really early on because we had such different communication styles, like how to overcome it. Because there was no option. Like you're a co-founder with somebody, you've signed a contract, like it's both in your best interest. It's like a marriage. It's both in your best interest to have this succeed. So you have to just do it, and get through that argument, find a solution, come out on the other side. So like in general, I think it's helped with my, people skills, my interpersonal skills. And then now we also have a third co-founder with this, and she's a badass data scientist. She's very entrepreneurial herself. And she's very much like the science. I'm on the exact opposite end of being the art, and then he's kind of like in the middle. So we all balance each other really well. But I think it's really important when you have a co-founder that like you have separate skill sets, because then, I can never tell that person, well, you need to do it this way or that way. Like we have to kind of trust one another that because you're an expert in your field and I'm an expert in my field, we have to rely on that. And, it helps because we know that we need the other person, like I can't do this without them. They can't do it without me.
Amazing. It's like you understand that you each have your own domain, and it helps with decision making because it's like,
It
you
really
know,
does. Like I don't know if I was a solo founder, that would probably be my biggest struggle is decision making. Like I am such a slow decision maker, even like to give you an idea, what like when I'm on an airplane and you get like a drink and a snack, once they come down with the cart, it doesn't matter if I'm in the last row of the plane, I start thinking, okay, well, do I want a sweet drink or with a salty snack, or if they only have a sweet snack, then I'm gonna get this drink instead, like I'm my decision making process, I think about and it's not efficient whatsoever. So it's really helpful to have other people there. And then just to not feel alone, you know, like to not feel like you're doing something on your own.
it's like the whole founder journey. I think you can describe it as like you have this vision, and it's hard to stay in it if there's no one to tell you, yes, we can. And,
Yeah,
some days you believe a little more or a little less, and the other person kind of balances you out, and it's a really comfortable game to play rather than being a solo founder, which I think is quite difficult.
absolutely. Yeah, that's totally true. And I mean, especially like my unsolicited piece of advice for founders would be like um there have been successful companies with solo founders, absolutely. But I would say get co-founders if you can and have an equal split. Like one thing that my co-founder, I heard him say yesterday, which is so true, is, you can't give yourself 20% more of the company just because you came up with the idea, because that idea is going to change 18 more times before you actually have a successful product. And it's more important that you have founders who are on board that, if you have 60% and they have 40% or even like 70-30 split, they're not going to be as invested as you because at the end of the day, they're not going to feel as your equal. So we all have equal splits. We've always been of that mindset. And for my personal opinion, it's better to have a smaller slice of a bigger pie than a bigger slice of a small pie. Like,
Amen.
yeah.
Okay. What's one thing in entrepreneurship in general that surprised you? That you were like, what?
Surprised me. Okay. I guess there's a lighthearted one, and there's probably the heavier one, which I said I'd talk about failure, so I guess we should go into that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is that the thing that surprised me the most was you always hear, if you listen to commencement speeches or these kind of other founders, motivational speakers talk about failure and how you're going to fail, you always think in your head, okay, yeah, of course I'm going to fail and it'll be fine. I'll get back up and I'll do it again. But I don't think that you can actually understand the gravity of how much it actually hurts to fail until you've experienced it yourself. It's one of those things that has given me a lot of respect for those serial entrepreneurs that you see where they have failure after failure after failure and they get up and they try again. Like it is so difficult to have your ego bruised. Like maybe one time you fail and you're still, shiny and new and excited. You have that zest for life and the future is just completely bright. Yeah. But after that happens, three times, four times, five times, you're sitting there thinking, okay, maybe it's me. Like, so and it's not. Like all of those people at the top, they've failed like time and time again. If not, with individual businesses, they've had failures within their successful business, and like personal failures, all those kinds of things. So I have a lot more respect for people who are able to get back up again because like there was a part of me that I was just shattered when our company failed, like being completely out of money, going home on an airplane, having no idea what I'm going to do next, having no career prospects. I think I was 23 and I hadn't had a full-time job yet, except for my internship. And I was like, am I even gonna get a job? What's gonna happen? So the ability to get back up again, like failure is what surprised me the most about entrepreneurship was like, it's not just, lip service. It's not just a thing that people say. It actually is crushing. And equally, not dwelling on those failures is a lot harder to do than it sounds. And then maybe more lighthearted thing about entrepreneurship that surprised me was just how so many of us have no idea what we're actually doing. And
I love
we're
that
just
one.
just figuring it out as we go along. So, yeah, building the plane while flying it.
Wow, I couldn't agree more on both points. It's
Yeah.
the second one I was shocked by. I was like realizing, because when you don't have many entrepreneur friends, you kind of just get your information online and you don't understand that sometimes numbers on a slide are absolutely made up and like
Oh,
just like
totally made up.
assumptions that mean absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But when you're so new into this, you're like, I have to get these numbers. How do I get these numbers? How do I do it? And like everybody's just faking it.
It really is. Like that is absolutely true. And it just goes to show too that in a more motivational sense, like the barrier or the thresh barrier to entry is much lower than you'd actually think. Like you don't actually have to know how to form an S corp or whatever. You can figure those things out as you go. All those little legal things or filing taxes, like you don't have to know. You don't have to do research on it to get started on building a product. And yeah.
Wow, completely agree. Also about what you said about failure. I feel like it's exactly as you said. You assume it's gonna happen because everyone says it does. So you assume it will might happen sometime, but you never assume that what you're doing right now would fail because you're doing it. But you can't really anticipate how hard it's gonna be. A bit like I feel like it's a bit like a first breakup, like after a first relationship. Like
Yeah.
you could never explain to yourself before how hard this is gonna be. And you have to do it unless
Yeah.
you'll never be.
It's so true. Like that's a really good analogy for it, Yeah, it's difficult to describe it to yourself, or to even picture what it's going to be like to feel it. But I think like with failure, what's interesting is that there's kind of a sweet spot between like having a failure and just getting up and going and never learning anything from it versus like dwelling on it to the point where it becomes debilitating. Um, I played water polo in high school and college, and one of the things I remember that our coach used to say is that like if you miss a shot or if you do something wrong, you have to take the punch and then forget about it. Like you have to learn what you did wrong, but then also forget and like drop the feelings, drop your ego about it, the pain, just kind of like let it go, take the piece of learning out of it, and then go into like you can't go into the next fight thinking about all the times you got punched, essentially. Um, and so yeah, there's a delicate balance between like taking that thing and then like and not letting it define you, but also being able to learn all those little things that you would do better next time. Oh, and I think I struggle with that too. And I think that's probably an ego thing, holding on to that, self-doubt and whatnot.
Definitely. When did you first feel comfortable to call yourself a founder?
I don't think I actually did until I was literally signing a founder agreement. And even when I saw at the top it said founder agreement, I was like, oh, I'm a founder. So that was a little bit weird to me. And I think you have this moment of like, oh, like this is cool. And then all of the excitement wears off and you're suddenly asking yourself, okay, what's next? Now, what do I do? This is just a title on a piece of paper. Like anybody can go on their LinkedIn and put founder as their job title. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's
And
yeah,
people do.
yeah, yeah. Anybody can put entrepreneur in their Instagram bio or whatever. And who am I to say that you can't? But, for me, I just It was like a moment of excitement, but then like a, okay, now what? Now what do we do? Now how do we make this true?
Cool. What's one of the crazier, weirder, memorable things you've done to get a client, investor, deal, something like that?
I think I'm gonna disappoint you because I don't think I have too crazy of a story. I think I have more. I have different things that I've done in my career in general, but I think we've done pretty conventional stuff. Like we've had my co-founder, we call him like he's really good at cold emails, so he's been able to get responses from people that you would never expect to respond, like founders of successful companies, like literal billionaires. Like he's good with cold email, but I don't think we've ever done anything crazy or outlandish. We've tried. So we've certainly like we saw this somebody on Twitter was talking about how they got meetings with investors by like finding their Venmo account because Mo Venmo accounts are I mean, I feel like I shouldn't be sharing this, but Venmo accounts are like public. And so everybody created a Venmo account back in the day, a lot of founders before they even became successful or famous. So you could find like Gary Tan's
Some
like
good piece of
Venmo. Yeah.
information.
And so what we did was I would send like 2 cents to um someone and say, hey, I'd love your 2 cents on my startup idea or something like that. So you could send them money to get their attention and like that was one of the crazier things that we tried. It worked for a different founder. It didn't work for us. The cat was out of the bag already, I guess.
Oh, still good story.
Yeah. Well, you
I
do
feel
what you
like,
can. Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, it's like there's always these weird stories that the fact that you don't see that as a crazy story, I mean, that's pretty insane. I mean, you just sent money to random people who you were hoping to get in business with. That's, I don't know. I like it. I like the idea.
Yeah, something quirky. I would say, like, I think that when it comes to getting attention, like especially with cold emails, you need to get to the point. And what I've learned from my co-founders' successful cold emails is you need to have, it needs to be personalized, obviously, to the person you're sending it to, especially if it's an investor or any kind of person of influence. And you need to get to the point, no fluff, no, oh, I'm a fan, like this is my background, here's 10 sentences about what my startup does. Like it has to be funny, intriguing, and relevant. And just like
Uh-huh.
2 lines or something. And not asking really for anything. But yeah, I mean, I haven't had the same success rate, so but I'm just from what is successful for my co-founder, but
That's wild. Amazing. How did you get into what you're doing? Like, why did you study what you studied? Were you thinking in the entrepreneurial like mindset, or was it just something that interested you?
so I actually did my degree in something called graphic communication. It's kind of just like the business of graphic design. It's not a super common major, but I think it's because I had a background in art. I was always, into painting and art in school, and I, you know, flip-flopped in high school as every teenager does between, what do you want to be when you grow up? But I knew that with graphic design or something like that, it was more, it was still creative, but also potentially lucrative. I knew that it's no secret that like being an artist is not necessarily the most lucrative career choice that unless you're in the top 20% and know how to market yourself really well. And yeah, I kind of just stumbled into it. Like this is one of the things about me is that I probably could be a little more calculated in my decision making, but I applied to a different major every university. So like everything from I applied to fine art, I applied to graphic communication, I applied to business, I applied to neuroscience, I applied to like I kind of just let that make the decision for me and then just whatever felt right. Um, so because I think I kind of understood that what you study doesn't necessarily inform what your career is going to be. So I just went after the things that interested me.
Cool. And then you decided on, I forgot the name,
It
on
was
a
graphic
graphic.
communication. Yeah, there was a minor in user experience design, or a concentration in user experience design. So I was lucky that in this small program, there were a couple of teachers that were really bullish on teaching like web and media, where some teachers, were still teaching like print and packaging. I could tell you, how they make paper, how most packaging is printed, but that didn't really interest me as a career, so, unfortunately.
Cool. It sounds like you really realize that, like, whatever you do, you're going to be able to use it in whatever way you choose. So you better just choose something that you want to do, which is pretty smart.
Yeah, especially with entrepreneurship.
It's always interesting to talk to founders about how they feel about university, out college, all,
Yeah.
like overall, because I see a lot of value in it. Especially in like just surround yourself with people of a certain kind that you want to be or learn from. But also, I see a lot of, wasted time in a way. So it's really interesting. How did you experience it?
That's a good point. I think yeah, there probably is a lot of wasted time, especially in terms of, with entrepreneurship, you can expect to fail for quite a long time before you succeed. So the sooner you can start, the better. But I am a little conflicted on it too. I'm really thankful for university because I never would have, I think, built up the confidence in like my intellectual capabilities without having that experience. And also I wouldn't have been introduced to startups and entrepreneurship. Maybe I would have stumbled into it. I don't know what I don't know, but yeah, it's hard to say. There are certain degrees that you could do, or maybe certain schools. I think it's just like with everything in life, you get out of it what you put into it. If you're not going to put any effort, if you're not going to take any chances or say yes to any opportunities, regardless of whether it's in university or just like it, in your personal life, you're never going to grow. So I think that maybe the degree to which university is effective is probably proportional to the personality of whatever person is going through it. So, yeah, that's my not very well thought through thought.
No, but I liked it. It was, it's true. Like if you go into it just to pass the time, then you're just gonna pass time. But if you go in to really take the most, then it's different.
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely.
Okay. So, what is one thing that, like, some early success you've had in any of the startups, some small thing that would seem small from the outside, but from being on the inside felt like, wow, like this is going well. I can't believe this. This is amazing. Like something like that.
The first time, you're gonna laugh, the first time we ever made a sale on the internet, the first time somebody gave us money to use a product that we had built was $1. And I think after Stripe commissions, it was like 72 cents. But we were ecstatic. We're like, oh my God, someone just paid us money, real money on the internet to use something that we created. And when we were working on our first, the company in Italy, it was called the Mamma. We'd gotten to a point where we were just, struggling. And so as creative exercises, we would say, okay, like, let's take this weekend. I think we did this once, maybe twice. We said, just to help with our creative process, get us out of, thinking about the company, we're going to take one weekend and do a hackathon, just the two of us, and we'll come up with a business idea and execute on it. So we came up with this idea for TikTokers to answer questions for $1 or 1 quid because it was focused on the UK market, £1, and by answering a question from their audience for in video form. And we called it Quidvid. So we, from concept to execution, it took 8 days for us to come up with the idea, do all of the branding, build the entire product, build out a social media accounts, message a ton of creators, get people using the product. I think we had like 300 users on it, and eventually we would reach out to kind of like medium-sized creators with, 20 to 100,000 followers, and they would reach out to their audience and say, "You can ask me any question, and I'll answer it with a video. It's one quid." And we very quickly learned that it was a flawed business idea, but it was so exciting to have, somebody on the internet we didn't know give us that $1. So that was like the glimmer of hope that was, we can do this. And yeah, it was really fun and exciting. And then I
I love it.
remember, yeah, I remember when we were working on Coffee Closers in the beginning, I was in Argentina, and I was involved in some startup groups there, some digital nomad groups. And I remember talking to a girl who was building a business. We went out to lunch and she was telling me all about her business. And she asked if we had ever had any successes. And I said, no, honestly, we sold $1 worth. And she was amazed too, which was exciting. She was like, "You got the fact that you got someone to give you money over the internet is like going from 0 to 1." So it was my literal 0 to 1 moment. So that was really rambly. Sorry, but
That's amazing. It was, I A, relate very much. B, I remember like mine, I can think of one that's even smaller. Like there was so I was my startup was it was helping people find subletting through the friends of their friends. So for example, if you were going to New York and you need someone to somewhere to stay for a month, then and you don't want to live at some stranger's place or to get, like what's it called? Scammed. So you would you would look on the app and you would see, oh, Martin, who's a friend of Emily, is offering his house, and Emily went to school with you, for example. So I remember we used it we started in Tel Aviv, and my friend was in the US. She was like doing, like talking to people, figuring out where we go next. Basically, we're thinking LA, New York. And she was there and she needed to sublet her place. And I'm not sure exactly like what ended up happening, but there was a guy and he ended up subletting her room. Like we lived together also. And I didn't really know how they met. But oh, now I remember it wasn't when she was in abroad. It was when we had a third roommate who he was abroad. So someone came and subletted his place. And I didn't know how he knew us. And we were really starting out. And one day I asked him, like, he's totally the ICP, right? So I
yeah.
asked him, like, how did you get us? And he was like, oh, this WhatsApp group, my friend told me about it. And his friend is like a pretty known Israeli influencer. And I was like, which WhatsApp group? And he shows me the group and it's our WhatsApp group. And I was like, I couldn't believe it.
Love that.
Wow, yeah, that was a good moment.
It's a good feeling. It's a really good feeling. And that's an interesting idea too, because it solves like one of the problems that Airbnb, and coming from someone who is currently in an Airbnb and stays in Airbnbs all over the world, it's you don't, it's nice to stay in a home, but it doesn't solve one of the next problems, which is that when you go to a new place, you don't have friends, or you can't, it's very difficult to meet people who are your age that aren't just other travelers passing through. So yeah, no, that's an interesting idea. Who knows? Maybe one day you'll be your
Yeah,
third successful startup.
yeah, I'm,
Or
I'm sure. I mean, there are other startups working on it right now on similar things. And I mean, I hope they solve this issue. It's definitely something that's been on our, like, we understand it is a problem and we believe there is a solution, but we couldn't get to it with the given time and resources we were willing to invest. I would say if we were willing to, like, yeah.
you're willing to.
Like, if we were willing to put 10 years into hoping something works out, maybe, maybe not. Like, there was growth, but at some point, honestly, like, I can give you a lot of pretty well put startup reasons of why it didn't work, but the truth is just that I felt completely burnt out and like kind of lost faith in the direction. And also throughout the journey, you learn a lot of things, and you learn that creating a network based B2C startup is like one of the hardest things to do. So it's
Yeah. That's like one of the I don't know what YC has a term for this, but there are certain startup ideas that they get, and a lot of early founders will try to do either like a social network or a marketplace. You and I both tried to do a marketplace with our first thing, and it just makes it infinitely more difficult because now you have two parties involved. You know, you have supplier and the consumer, and you've got to manage all of that, and there's, a million moving parts. And yeah, you're right. Like if you work on it unrelentingly for, 10 years, maybe you could get something off the ground. But I think that's like another big thing of early founders is knowing when to actually throw in the towel if you haven't had, if you're burnt out, if you're not excited about the idea anymore, if you're out of money, and we always say if you're out of ideas, if you don't have an idea of where you're going to go next, then it's probably, time to move on to something else. That doesn't mean the problem can't be solved by ever, but you know,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel
It's
that. I totally feel it.
it's really, I think it's one of the things I had to learn the hard way. Like that letting go of an idea is not the ultimate failure. Now I'm not going to succeed in anything. Like it's just it's not a bug, it's a feature. Like
Yeah,
it's
exactly. No, one failure closer to success is what I always say. It's stepping stones, and sometimes that ability to like move fast and say, okay, like this isn't working, I'm gonna do something else, or this isn't working, I'm gonna pivot. Like sometimes it's a case of giving up too soon when if you keep pushing, you're just on the other side of a breakthrough. But then also, sometimes people will work on companies for so long that are just never going to work before they give up. And I think it's good to like, if you quit at a time where you still have enough excitement and enough energy to go to something else, like, there's nothing wrong with that.
yeah, I feel like if you've got the zest to keep going and the idea isn't working, then you switch ideas. And I feel like it's a very thin line of understanding, am I just in a bad phase? Am I just figuring it out? Or is this idea actually, it's time to let it go? And it's a very like fine line to understand. And I don't think there's a correct answer. I mean, at some point you just kind of have to trust yourself and be like, this is what I'm gonna choose, and whether it's correct or not,
Yeah.
no one knows.
Yeah. No, that's so true. Like, and I thought of the quote I was trying to think of before, which is failure is a course correction for success. I don't remember who said it, but it's very true about being able to trust yourself and just um, be able to make that decision, even if you don't know if it's gonna like when you make a decision, you never know if it's gonna be right. You kind of just have to make the decision because, as you know, Carmela Soprano says in The Sopranos, more is lost by indecision than wrong decision. And so if that making that decision to move on and go to the next thing might, if that's what you choose, you just gotta go for it. And
Yeah.
clearly you are doing that because yeah.
Yeah,
Here we
it's
are.
interesting. Like it's in my mind it's something that I'm very much fascinated by. Because end of the day, like there's never a point where you actually have to quit. And it's all about the story that you kind of tell yourself and maybe even others. But it's like what is in your mind when you stop working on something? Is the story I quit because why? Like what happened? Or is it I moved on to the next company, so I let that one go, which is a more it's a nicer story to tell. But like it's interesting.
Yeah, it's difficult. Like I would compare this to kind of reading a book. So
Hmm.
what like I there t I'm notorious for having a stack of 10 to 20 books that I've started reading or I'm halfway through, and I keep starting more books before I finish the first one. And I heard something someday from an author about how um you people who read a lot, they don't get hung up on whether they finish this book. It's not like a to-do list item that they need to cross off. They just, if you can't get into that, then it's poorly written, move on to the next one, and you'll finish the next one. And then you have more volume, more chances, if we're looking at this from starting companies, you have more chances to succeed, you like so the story you
Hmm.
tell yourself about, why didn't I finish this? It's all about, that's one of the other big things I've learned from this entrepreneurship journey is that everything can be reframed, everything can be reshaped, like it's all about the context and how you view the thing.
What would you say about the like the statement that a lot of times founders give up too soon? Like how do you see that?
I think that you have to be aware and ask yourself, like, why am I really giving up right now? Because if you have an idea that you truly, truly believe in, um, then you won't give up. And if you feel that you're ready to give up on something, is it because you've lost faith in the idea or you've lost faith in yourself? And I would say that if you've lost faith in yourself, don't listen to that voice because that voice is a liar. You just need to maybe shift gears a little bit, focus on something different. As a designer, I focus a lot, obviously, on building product, but sometimes I get to those points where I'm like, I'm a terrible designer. I can't possibly do all of this myself. I just need to shift gears into marketing for a couple of weeks and focus on that kind of thing. And I tend to find that when I go back to that thing, the ideas come flooding back. But I think you do need some initial confirmation. It especially helps if you're solving a problem that you face yourself because, you know, like for instance, Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook, like he had this idea. I was recently listening to an older talk by Peter Thiel talking about how when Yahoo offered to buy Facebook for like $1 billion, any logical person would look at that and say, "Oh my God, it's $1 billion, take it." But in his mind, he just knew where the company was going. So it wasn't even a question. It was like, well, they're undervaluing our company because they haven't valued the features we haven't built yet. So he had this kind of like vision in his head, and as long as you have the vision and you know that that idea is, you just truly believe it's going to work. Like people have this problem. You've talked to users and the users have confirmed that they have this problem. They don't have a good solution for it. Then, you know, keep going. And conversely, like if you get stuck in one of those like paradoxical business ideas, like how with Quidvid, the example from before, it was a bit of a catch-22 because the small creators were the only ones who would want to use a platform to get just $1 for one answer. And the bigger creators, that wasn't worth their time. But with the smaller creators, there were less people that wanted to ask them questions. So there was kind of like this paradoxical business solution happening. And we just realized this isn't an idea. This is the solution and the problem are always going to be at odds in this particular instance. So yeah.
Hmm. Interesting. It is a cool idea though. Like it's a fun.
It's like Cameo kind of, I think, but
Cool.
for regular people. And then and then TikTok created the ability where you could create a video response from a question. So that was interesting because that feature came after. So shortly after. So they had already thought about it long ago. But
It reminds me of when we were working on the startup, like when we were at the hype of like, okay, we're taking this seriously, da da da. We were just my co-founder already quit her job and I was about to quit mine. And then Airbnb launched basically subletting. Like we were shocked. We didn't even know how to like process the information. 'Cause it's like on the one hand, we just got confirmation that this is a like this is the time to do this. On the other hand, Airbnb is now we're competing with Airbnb. That's not so cool. And but end of the day, it was a very different approach. So that wasn't the problem.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh,
like that, you're right that it's confirmation when you see that one of the big players comes out with the same idea. It's confirmation that there's a need for that idea. But there's also like, just because the big player is doing that idea doesn't mean they're going to be the ones to solve it. You know, the nice thing about being a startup is that you can move fast and you can like niche down and focus on solving one problem really well, where they have, different business units that they're trying to focus on. They have tons of people on their team you know, they're getting pulled in a lot of directions. And like the perfect example of this right now, we were just talking about how much OpenAI is starting to replace Google. And just like 2 years ago, just the idea of me using something other than Google to look stuff up, simple stuff, or even like YouTube, or I know Gen Z uses TikTok a lot to go to search for things. But the idea of that, of something making Google as a search engine become slightly, move towards becoming obsolete, it is crazy. So I guess, I would say a word of encouragement to anybody who's in that position of, I have this problem and now this big player that's already in the space is attacking that problem. Like, that doesn't mean that they're going to solve it better than you are.
and I would even say that like something that I know now that I didn't even have the like mental capacity of really understanding is that big companies have big budgets and it's much easier to buy a company than to build everything. Like if you are doing well in a space and a big company wants the whatever you do as one of their features, it's easier to buy you than to build you. Like
Yeah.
it's not, you're not actually competing necessarily unless you choose to. I mean, it's there's a lot of different, I guess it depends. If you want to be $1 billion company, then maybe you look at things differently. But for most founders, I would say most of them are okay with having a few, you know, couple 100 million plus exit. I think most of them are going to be happy with that. So it's really
Yeah.
like looking at it from a removing the competition element. Because at the end of the day, I remember I heard one of the guys who's either a really early employee in Canva or one of the co-founders, I don't remember, and he was saying like it's there's no such thing as competition when you're a small startup. Like there's enough people for everything. It's not Yahoo versus Google. It's like
Yeah.
so many. Yeah.
I mean, you have to have an abundance mindset about these types of things. Just like anything in life, if you focus too much on the competition, you're surely gonna fail. You have to kind of have a heads down approach of, oh, okay, that's cool. They're doing that too. All right, I'm gonna get back to work. I'm not gonna obsess over it. I'm not gonna let their decisions inform my decisions. I'm just gonna keep doing what I think is right and what my customers are asking me for, and that's really all that matters at the end of the day. There's
Definitely.
enough, there's not a lack of, customers or money or resources out there, it's all abundant, not a winner
Yeah.
takes all.
I
Most
even
things are not winner takes all. Yeah, sorry,
exactly.
go ahead.
No, it's I was just thinking I'm working with this entrepreneur now and every time and we're working on ideating different ideas and every time we go in a certain direction, he's like, I'm gonna set a meeting with the person who founded a company that is very similar. And it always like I remember I asked him, don't you feel like that's a bit like you're telling them, hi, I want to build something that competes with yours? Like, isn't that weird? Isn't like, wouldn't that cause some resistance? And he's like, anyone who's like in a good sense, what I'm saying is almost a childish thought because anyone who's in the game for long enough knows that some small entrepreneur reaching out and asking for like advice on how to create something like theirs that is not exactly the same, that's not a threat. That's like, it's just an opportunity to help someone. And most of the times they want to do that. And that's like a big mindset shift that I feel like I got to make since basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I think that like if you're confident in enough in yourself, you won't be threatened by the competition, and that works in both directions, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So next question. And actually it's so funny. We've done like, I would say less than half the questions, and we're already kind of almost out of time, but I'm gonna focus on the important
If
one.
there's one last one that's really that you really want to ask, absolutely. Like we can do it.
Um, yeah. Okay, so I'll ask a couple more. One, how do you feel like this whole entrepreneurship journey affected you as a person? Like, what would you say, how was Maddie from before versus Maddie now?
I think that I had a lot of confidence or overconfidence at the beginning that was unfounded, you know? So that kind, in some ways, I've become a little more down to earth on like certain, or not, that's probably not the right way to phrase it, but there were some things I was very confident about that I got very quickly, you know, knocked down on. And then there were, but in other ways, I've kind of been, so you have this kind of like inflated, you know, persona or idea about how life is going to be and how entrepreneurship is going to be, and then you get knocked down a little bit, but you actually are able to build yourself back up on a stronger foundation. And I have more confidence in the things that I know that I'm capable of. So, you know, in some ways, I think I've gotten a more realistic idea about certain aspects of myself, and yeah, in other ways, I think that I know what my limitations are, is probably a good way to put it.
Amazing. It's wow, that's a good one. It's like you understand, you know yourself enough to understand what your field is, I
Yeah,
guess.
what your strengths and weaknesses are. And
Amazing.
in a lot of ways, you know, I'm capable of a lot more than I thought I would be. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's one of the fun things that you learn. And also having co-founders really helps because you can see how the ways you're different, and understanding that something that you might think is just like, obviously I can do this thing, like not everyone can do that. And it really is a strength of yours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, would be lost without them.
Okay. Final question. What do you think is one really important trait for a founder to have?
Um, so one thing that if you're already a founder, you probably have that you don't realize, and if you don't have it, you should have, is you cannot think that doing anything in your business is beneath you. You know, you can't have this mindset, this employee mindset of, oh, okay, well, we need to build a CRM, and you think to yourself, you know, I'm a designer, that's not my job. If something needs to be done, like if you have to be willing to do it. You can't think that any task is beneath you. Um, you know, if you're the CEO, that doesn't matter. You need to be on customer service calls. You need to be talking directly to users. And I think that all the best founders or anyone who's building their own company, that is already intuitively true to them. But I heard somebody articulate it that way recently, and I just thought, wow, that's so true. You know, if you go to a corporate job and your boss asks you and your team to do something, you'll get plenty of people that say, well, that's not really my job, and that there's like resistance. But, you know, obviously, when you have your own company, everything is your job. So nothing is beneath you. No menial task, no copying and pasting email addresses of cold leads is ever going to be beneath you. And granted, there's definitely times where you should delegate and not, but you have to have an attitude of a willingness to do anything.
I love that. That is so, oh, Love it. Okay, so thank you so much for everything. I loved how open you are and just like the journey. It sounds like you've really learned so much from being what's the best way to put it? Maybe like being someone who's new in this world and has the way you view the world and what you think will be easy and hard, and then kind of have that shattered and then building again, building again. It really sounds like you've come a long way. And thank you so much for sharing everything.
Thank you very much.